Jersey Bridgeman, a tragic tale of child abuse, justice, and hope. In the quiet suburbs of Rogers, Arkansas, a young girl named Jersey Bridgeman began her life far too quickly marked by pain and suffering. Born into a family that should have provided love and protection, Jersey instead encountered harsh realities from a tender age. Her story is one that highlights the devastating impact of domestic violence on children, and the urgent need for early intervention and awareness. Jersey was the daughter of David Bridgeman and Desiree Bridgeman. However, her home life was anything but safe. Her father, David, and her stepmother, Jana Bridgeman, inflicted severe abuse on Jersey, creating an environment of fear and trauma. The physical violence was not random or sporadic. It was a cruel routine. Jersey was often tied down, restrained by belts and dog chains, a practice meant to suppress her movements and, in a twisted manner, protect her from harm she might inflict upon herself. The methods employed by David and Jana were chilling. They tied Jersey to furniture, such as dressers, using belts. The child was unable to move freely, her body marked by the straps that left deep imprints of trauma. A dog collar, repurposed from a silver chain, was also used to restrict her movements, symbolizing an object meant for a pet but used for a helpless child. Instead of nurturing Jersey, her father rationalized these actions by claiming that he was preventing her from getting into things she shouldn't. A justification that reveals the depths of misguided logic behind abusive behavior. Despite some outward appearance of normalcy at moments, particularly at her mother Desiree's house, Jersey's life, when at her father's, was filled with fear, pain, and confusion. One can only imagine the confusion and terror that a 6-year-old must feel when her bodily autonomy and safety are repeatedly violated by the very individuals who should be her guardians. As the abuse continued, signs of severe neglect and harm became evident. It wasn't just the physical injuries from restraint. There was a deep psychological torment. Jersey, so young and innocent, was being stripped of her right to a carefree childhood. The trauma left lasting marks on her emotional development, which would be evident in her later interactions, and the resilience she displayed despite her circumstances. Inevitably, the authorities were alerted to the situation when someone reported potential abuse at the Bridgeman residence in Rogers. The gravity of Jersey's situation could no longer be ignored. The law stepped in when it was discovered that Jersey had been tied to a dresser using a belt and a chain that resembled a dog collar. This startling evidence forced law enforcement to take immediate action. David Bridgeman and his wife, Desiree, were no longer together at that point, but they still shared custody over Jersey. While life at her mother's home might have been relatively normal, the conditions at her father's household were drastically different. Law enforcement, after conducting investigations, arrested David and his new wife, Jana. In court, David admitted to tying Jersey up, but claimed it was an attempt to keep her safe. He argued that he believed Jersey might be sleepwalking, and that tying her up was a necessary precaution, a claim that seemed far-fetched given the cruel nature of the restraints. Ultimately, both parents were charged and pleaded guilty to crimes including permitting the abuse of a minor, false imprisonment, and endangering the welfare of a child. David Bridgeman received an 18-year prison sentence, and Jana Bridgeman was sentenced to 12 years in prison plus an additional term for probation revocation. Their convictions marked the end of one chapter of Jersey's life, but opened the door to hope for a safer environment with her biological mother, Desiree. A seemingly hopeful beginning. After the ordeal with her father and stepmother, Jersey Bridgeman found herself in a new setting under the care of her biological mother, Desiree. This marked the beginning of what everyone hoped would be a brighter chapter in her life, free from the shadows of past abuse. Jersey's move to safety occurred in the serene town of Bentonville, Arkansas, specifically at an address on 608 Southeast A Street. This location was significant, not just as a physical space, but as a symbol of hope, a place where Jersey could potentially heal from her traumatic experiences. Desiree, determined to provide a safe haven for her daughter, made every effort to create a loving environment where Jersey could feel secure. Living at 608 Southeast A Street brought Jersey into close proximity with neighbors she would come to know well, particularly a couple named Amanda and Zachary Holly. Amanda and Zachary were newlyweds, having only recently married, and they were good friends of Desiree. This neighborhood was expected to be a tight-knit community where everyone looked out for one another. For Jersey, it initially seemed like a fresh start, a chance to leave behind her horrific past and embrace a life filled with normalcy, school, and friendship. In the days and weeks following the move, Jersey began to adjust to her new life with her mother. The transition from a home tainted by fear and abuse to one filled with warmth and care was not easy, but Jersey showed remarkable resilience. She started kindergarten at Sugar Creek Elementary School, where teachers and classmates noticed her gentle nature and a smile that, despite everything, still shone brightly. Desiree, deeply committed to her daughter's well-being, made the neighborhood a welcoming and safe space. The closeness to Amanda and Zachary Holly provided additional reassurance. Neighbors in such close proximity often form bonds that can act as a support network, offering care and vigilance that is crucial for a child like Jersey, who had experienced so much trauma. Amanda and Zachary were not just neighbors. They were part of Jersey's support system, involved in babysitting and spending time with her when needed. Despite the underlying sorrow that no one could fully erase, Jersey began to display signs of hope. At just 6 years old, she exhibited a remarkable capacity to adapt, to find joy in small moments, and to maintain a spirit of innocence that belied the horrors she had endured. Her love for her little sister, Leah, and her joy in being a big sister, pointed to a natural resilience and capacity for love that was incredibly heartwarming. The new environment in Bentonville represented a significant change from her past. No longer constrained by abusive patterns, Jersey started exploring the world through school, play, and interaction with caring adults. Her teachers at Sugar Creek Elementary noticed that she was a sweet and joyful child, a stark contrast to the life of fear she once knew. The community rallied around her, and small but meaningful changes began to shape her everyday life. Amanda and Zachary Holly emerged as key figures in Jersey's new life. They were trusted friends of Desiree and regularly took care of Jersey and her sister when Desiree needed to be at work. Their willingness to help seemed like a blessing to the Bridgeman family, offering a semblance of normalcy and stability to the children. For a while, it appeared that Jersey was finally in a safe place where she could recover from the early wounds inflicted upon her. As Jersey settled into her new life, moments of happiness emerged amid the shadow of her past. While trauma can leave deep scars that may not be visible on the surface, the environment provided by her mother, supported by caring neighbors, offered a platform for healing. Jersey's laughter echoed in her new home, and the small moments, playing with her sister, attending school, and sharing a smile with her mother, became precious markers of hope. However, while many believed that Jersey was on the path to recovery, the underlying tension of past abuse lingered. The community was not aware that, even with these positive changes, dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. The trust placed in those closest to the family would soon be betrayed in a manner no one could have foreseen. The fateful night, and the 911 call. As Jersey Bridgeman began to adjust to her new life in Bentonville, Arkansas, hope seemed to blossom where despair once reigned. living at 608 Southeast A Street with her mother, Desiree, provided the safe haven that Jersey desperately needed. Yet, despite the promise of this fresh start, fate had another tragic twist in store for the young girl. On the evening of November 19, 2012, Jersey's life took a dark turn. That night, Desiree Bridgeman had to work late, and like many working parents, she relied on trusted neighbors to care for her children. Jersey, along with her little sister Leah, was left in the care of their neighbors, Amanda and Zachary Holly. The Holly family, well-respected and close friends of Desiree, had been a supportive pillar for the family. Their willingness to help brought comfort to Desiree, who trusted them completely with her children's safety. The night proceeded quietly. Amanda and Zachary took care of the children, providing the comfort and guidance that families provide to their little ones. Jersey, still new to this environment but gradually feeling secure, played and interacted with her sister under the watchful eyes of their caretakers. Meanwhile, Desiree completed her work shift, hopeful that her daughters were safe and happy with the Hollis. As the night deepened, Desiree finally returned home around 11 p.m. On November 19th, the reunion with her daughters was meant to be a moment of relief after a long day apart. Zachary Holly helped carry Jersey back to her home at 608 Southeast A Street, while Desiree took care of little Leah. The scene seemed ordinary, a caring neighbor assisting a mother with her children. Shortly after returning home, Desiree tucked both Jersey and Leah into bed, ensuring they were comfortable before retiring for the night. Jersey, despite the tumultuous past, must have felt a fleeting sense of safety and love in her mother's arms. The house was quiet, and for a moment, it appeared that Jersey's nightmare might finally be over. However, as dawn approached on November 20th, a chilling realization shattered the fragile peace. At around 6:38 a.m., Desiree woke up to check on her children. The familiar sounds of morning routines were absent. Instead of finding her daughter sleeping soundly beside her, Desiree found an empty space where Jersey should have been. Panic surged through her as she called out for Jersey, only to be met with silence. Desperate and heartbroken, Desiree searched every corner of the house, under beds, in closets, behind doors, hoping to find some sign of her missing daughter. With each passing minute, the horror of Jersey's disappearance grew more palpable. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Desiree immediately dialed 911, her voice trembling as she reported her daughter missing. The call sent shockwaves through the local emergency response teams. Officers and investigators rushed to 608 Southeast A Street. Every second counted as law enforcement worked to piece together the timeline of what might have happened to the young girl. The neighborhood, once a quiet refuge, was suddenly bustling with police vehicles, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow in the early morning light. Neighbors watched in shock from behind curtains as the scene unfolded. For many, it was unthinkable that something terrible could happen in their seemingly safe community. Yet, the disappearance of a 6-year-old child shattered the illusion of safety and forced everyone to confront the harsh reality that danger can lurk even in the most familiar places. Investigators began combing through the house, meticulously searching for clues. Their initial theory revolved around Jersey having wandered off or been abducted from the home, but no immediate evidence suggested she had left the vicinity. The lack of signs of forced entry or a struggle within the house deepened the mystery. The search expanded beyond the Bridgeman residence as officers canvassed the neighborhood, questioning neighbors and checking nearby homes for any hint of Jersey's whereabouts. As Desiree stood outside her home, distraught and holding back tears, the reality of her situation settled in. Her daughter was missing in the early hours of the morning, and the community's collective heart ached with her. The call to 911 was not just a cry for help. It was the beginning of a frantic, community-wide search for a little girl whose fate was about to take a devastating turn. A horrifying discovery. The search for Jersey Bridgeman continued through the early morning hours of November 20th, 2012. Law enforcement combed through every corner of the neighborhood and surrounding areas, determined to find the missing child alive. Despite their tireless efforts, time was running out, and Jersey's fate remained unknown. After exhausting searches around the Bridgeman residence at 608 Southeast A Street and immediate surroundings, investigators focused on nearby properties. Their meticulous search soon led them to a vacant house located at 704 Southeast A Street, just 2 doors down from Jersey's home. The sight of this derelict property stirred unease, a place abandoned and forgotten, juxtaposed against the hope that Jersey might be found safe. Officers, led by Detective Mike Henson and others, approached the property with caution. The house was rundown, a stark contrast to the life Jersey had known just a few blocks away. It appeared empty, filled with only scattered trash and the remnants of neglect. But something about the open back door, a door left ajar, drew their attention. With flashlights piercing the dim morning light, they stepped inside the vacant property, their senses alert for any sign of Jersey. The atmosphere was heavy, filled with the unspoken dread that something terrible was hidden within. As they moved carefully through the rooms, the silence was deafening, and each creak of the floorboards echoed ominously. Eventually, the officers reached a dimly lit bedroom at the back of the house. There, in a closet, they found a sight no one could have prepared for: the lifeless body of a 6-year-old girl. The officers quickly realized the magnitude of the tragedy. They had found Jersey Bridgeman. The discovery was horrifying. Jersey lay face down, her small form battered by the signs of a struggle. Most shockingly, her pajama pants were wrapped tightly around her neck, twisted multiple times in a macabre display of strangulation. The scene was harrowing, and those present could only stand in silent disbelief at the brutality inflicted upon such an innocent child. As the officers secured the scene, the reality of the crime set in. Jersey's naked body, found in such a vulnerable state, was more than just a missing person case closed. It was a grim confirmation of a violent crime that had taken the life of a little girl. Detectives knew that every piece of evidence found at the scene would be crucial in understanding what happened to Jersey and bringing her killer to justice. Word of the discovery quickly spread through the community. Jersey Bridgeman's grandmother arrived at the scene, anxiously asking the officers if they had found her granddaughter. When they could not give a reassuring answer, her face fell with the realization of what had likely happened. The grief and shock among family members and neighbors were palpable, as the community braced itself for the difficult truth. Meanwhile, investigators began the painstaking work of preserving evidence. They photographed the scene, collecting samples that would later be analyzed in the state crime lab. Among the items of interest was a small bike found in front of Jersey's house, a possible clue to her final moments, and a deflated princess-themed balloon, symbols of a childhood abruptly ended. The discovery of Jersey's body sent ripples of horror and sorrow through Bentonville. The neighborhood, once considered safe and close-knit, was now shattered by the unspeakable loss of a child. The vacant house at 704 Southeast A Street, which had unknowingly harbored Jersey's remains, became an emblem of the hidden dangers that can exist even in familiar surroundings. As authorities sealed off the area and continued their investigation, questions multiplied. Who had brought Jersey to this place? Why was her body left here, so close to home yet so far from safety? The search for answers was just beginning, and with every passing hour, the community demanded justice for Jersey Bridgeman. The horrifying discovery not only marked the end of Jersey's brief life, but also ignited a community-wide resolve to ensure that no other child would suffer the same fate. In the face of such cruelty, the people of Bentonville and beyond were reminded of the urgent need to protect the most vulnerable, and to stand united against violence and injustice. DNA evidence and the criminal unveiled. Following the devastating discovery of Jersey Bridgeman's body in the abandoned house at 704 Southeast A Street, investigators faced the critical task of piecing together what had happened in those final, harrowing moments. The sheer horror of Jersey's death, combined with the absence of immediate suspects or witnesses, made the path to justice a challenging one. However, law enforcement's resolve was unwavering, and they turned to every tool and resource at their disposal, especially forensic evidence. Detectives meticulously combed through the crime scene, collecting what little evidence they could find. Among the items gathered were the torn fragments of Jersey's clothing, traces of bodily fluids, and various personal effects scattered around the room. Each piece of evidence was considered crucial in constructing a timeline and identifying the perpetrator. The investigators knew that Jersey's killer had to leave behind traces, no matter how small, that could ultimately lead them to the truth. With the crime scene secured, the evidence was transported to the Arkansas State Crime Lab for detailed forensic analysis. Forensic experts, working tirelessly, began analyzing the samples collected from Jersey's body and the immediate environment. Their primary focus was on DNA evidence, which would provide a definitive link between the crime scene and a suspect. The investigation took a pivotal turn when the forensic team discovered the presence of sperm cells on Jersey's body and on her clothing. This discovery confirmed that Jersey had been sexually assaulted before she died, a brutal reality that underscored the heinous nature of the crime. The evidence of sexual violence was overwhelming, and it provided investigators with a tangible lead. They now had a biological specimen that could be tested against known profiles to identify the perpetrator. Using advanced DNA profiling techniques, the forensic team compared the DNA extracted from the evidence with profiles in existing databases, as well as those of persons of interest in the area. This rigorous process eventually led to a match. The DNA found on Jersey's body was consistent with that of Zachary Holly, a 28-year-old neighbor who lived next door to where Jersey had resided at 608 Southeast A Street and near where her body was discovered. The revelation that Zachary Holly's DNA was present on Jersey's body marked a crucial moment in the investigation. Zachary Holly was not a stranger to Jersey. He was one of the very people entrusted by Jersey Bridgeman to care for her daughters. The shock of this discovery reverberated through the community. How could someone so close to the family be responsible for such an unspeakable act? As the investigators prepared to confront Zachary with the evidence, they also gathered additional information on his background, behavior, and interactions with Jersey. Interviews with neighbors, family members, and acquaintances painted a complex picture. Zachary Holly was known to be a helpful and friendly figure in the neighborhood, often seen assisting Desiree and taking care of Jersey when needed. This duality of his persona, both trusted caregiver and potential monster, added layers of confusion and disbelief to the case. Meanwhile, law enforcement officials sought to corroborate the timeline provided by Zachary. He had claimed that on the night of Jersey's disappearance, he had left home at 3:35 a.m. to go to the nearby Easy Mart to purchase Pepto-Bismol due to an upset stomach, a detail meant to provide him with an alibi. CCTV footage later confirmed Zachary's trip to the Easy Mart, lending credence to that portion of his story. However, this seemingly innocuous errand raised questions. Could this have been a diversion, a calculated move to create a false timeline? Faced with mounting evidence, Zachary Holly was brought in for further questioning. The weight of DNA evidence, combined with inconsistencies in his statements, made it increasingly difficult for him to maintain his innocence. The police eventually presented him with the overwhelming forensic proof linking him to the crime scene. After prolonged interrogation, confronted with the facts and evidence against him, Zachary Holly broke down. He confessed to the heinous crime, detailing how he had lured Jersey away from safety, sexually assaulted her, and then strangled her, actions that ultimately led to her untimely death. Zachary's confession was a grim turning point in the case. It provided closure to many of the questions that had haunted Jersey's family and community. The revelation that someone so seemingly benign and trustworthy could commit such an atrocity was both shocking and a stark reminder of how carefully one must choose the people entrusted with caring for children. This confession, corroborated by DNA evidence and forensic analysis, paved the way for charges to be formally pressed against Zachary Holly. The legal process was set into motion, and all eyes turned to the upcoming trial, where justice for Jersey Bridgeman would hopefully be served. The trial and sentencing. The courtroom in Bentonville, Arkansas, was filled with a somber atmosphere as the trial of Zachary Holly began. Friends, family, and community members gathered to witness the proceedings, hoping for justice for the young Jersey Bridgeman. The trial was a momentous event, not only for the family, but for the entire community, as it signified a collective stand against the unspeakable crime that had shattered their sense of safety. The prosecution laid out a compelling case against Zachary Holly. Evidence presented in court was overwhelming, from the forensic findings, DNA evidence linking him directly to Jersey Bridgeman, to his own confession of the crime. The images and testimony relating to the brutality of Jersey's death were heart-wrenching, yet they underscored the gravity of the charges against him. During the trial, the state medical examiner testified in detail about the findings from Jersey's autopsy. Dr. Frank Petty explained how the evidence of strangulation, such as retinal hemorrhages and other signs on the body, indicated that Jersey had suffered a terrifying ordeal. His testimony was graphic and painful, but it painted an unflinching portrait of the physical suffering Jersey endured, a necessary part of understanding the severity of the crime. Throughout the proceedings, the courtroom was silent, save for the occasional sob from Jersey's family members or the quiet murmur of those who couldn't bear the weight of the tragedy. The prosecution methodically presented its case, introducing witness after witness, forensic experts, neighbors, law enforcement officers, and others who had worked tirelessly on the investigation. Each testimony reinforced the narrative of Zachary Holly as the perpetrator of a deeply disturbing crime against a defenseless child. When he eventually took the stand, his demeanor was one of solemnity and regret. Yet his words offered little comfort to those who had lost Jersey. Instead, they served as a stark reminder of the actions he had taken and the irreversible harm he had caused. The defense attempted to mitigate the circumstances, possibly citing Zachary's troubled past, personal issues, or other factors that might influence sentencing. However, given the overwhelming evidence and the emotional weight of the testimony, these arguments resonated little with the jury. The defense acknowledged, to some extent, responsibility, but focused more on the legal strategies rather than on absolving him of the heinous acts. As the trial progressed, the jury was tasked with not only determining guilt, but also deciding on the appropriate punishment for such a horrific crime. The question of whether to impose the death penalty loomed large. The prosecution and the family of Jersey Bridgeman called for the highest possible sentence, arguing that only the most severe punishment could truly honor Jersey's memory and serve as a deterrent against such future crimes. After days of deliberation, the jury reached a unanimous verdict. Zachary Holly was found guilty of multiple charges: capital murder, kidnapping, rape, and residential burglary. The verdict brought a profound sense of relief to Jersey's family and community, who had longed for justice since that fateful night. The sentencing phase of the trial was equally poignant. The judge, taking into account the gravity of the crimes and the impact on Jersey's family and the community, handed down a severe sentence. Zachary Holly received a death sentence for the charge of capital murder, a decision that reflected the community's and the legal system's condemnation of his actions. Additionally, he was sentenced to 2 life sentences for the crimes of rape and kidnapping, plus 20 years for residential burglary. These sentences ensured that he would never be free to harm another child, and acknowledged the uncompromising severity of his crimes. The courtroom, filled with a mix of sorrow, anger, and relief, stood as a testament to the weight of the community's demand for justice. As Zachary Holly was led away in handcuffs, the collective hope was that his conviction and sentencing would bring some measure of closure to the shattered lives affected by his actions. Even though the trial marked the end of the legal proceedings, the emotional aftermath continued to resonate. Jersey Bridgeman's family, while devastated by their loss, found solace in the fact that justice had been served. The trial and sentencing of Zachary Holly became a defining moment for the community of Bentonville, a moment where they stood together to confront evil and advocate for the safety of their children. Zachary Holly's conviction was not just about punishing a criminal. It was about sending a clear message that domestic violence, especially crimes against children, would not be tolerated. The legal process underscored the importance of forensic science, community vigilance, and the relentless pursuit of truth in the face of unspeakable tragedy. Below is an expanded narrative covering Part 7, Tragedy, and a wake-up call in Part 8, a bell tolling for domestic violence of Jersey Bridgeman's story. These sections conclude the detailed, emotive account, emphasizing the community's reaction, the broader implications of the tragedy, and the urgent call to action against domestic violence. Tragedy and a wake-up call. The trial and sentencing of Zachary Holly brought a measure of legal closure, but it could not undo the deep scars left on the community of Bentonville, Arkansas, nor the irreversible loss of innocent Jersey Bridgeman. As the echoes of the courtroom verdict faded, the community was left to grapple with the enormity of what had transpired and to reflect on the lessons learned from such a tragedy. Community shock and mourning. The discovery of Jersey's body, the intense trial, and the final sentencing had a profound impact on Bentonville. Neighbors who once considered their streets safe were now confronted with the horrifying truth that danger could lurk next door, concealed behind a trusted facade. The shock was universal. How could someone so intimately involved in caring for a child commit such an atrocious act? As the community mourned, a series of candlelight vigils were organized. Over 100 people gathered at the local Children's Advocacy Center and other public spaces, holding purple ribbons in remembrance of Jersey, a symbol of their grief and a pledge to protect other children. Her teachers, friends, and family shared memories of her sweet smile and resilient spirit, creating a heartfelt tribute to her short but impactful life. Family and personal aftermath. For Desiree Bridgeman, Jersey's mother, the journey toward healing was fraught with complexity. While the conviction of Zachary Holly provided some semblance of justice, the pain of losing a child under such horrifying circumstances remained a daily burden. Desiree, along with family members, struggled to rebuild their lives. They relied on the support of the community, counselors, and each other to navigate the pain and to honor Jersey's memory. Jersey's father, David Bridgeman, who had been convicted earlier for his role in abusing Jersey, also faced his own personal reckoning. In a later interview from prison, he expressed profound regret for his actions and the role his drug use played in failing to protect his daughter. His words underscored a painful truth. The cycle of violence and neglect often spans generations, and can have irreversible consequences. A wake-up call for society. The tragedy of Jersey Bridgeman did more than shatter a family. It served as a wake-up call for the entire community and society at large. It highlighted the unsettling reality that child abuse and domestic violence can occur in any household, even among those perceived as kind and trustworthy. The hope that Jersey might recover from her early wounds was tragically cut short, but her story became a catalyst for change. Community leaders, educators, and law enforcement officials recognized that preventing similar tragedies required vigilance, education, and a proactive approach to safeguarding children. They began to advocate for stronger child protection policies, improved training for educators and social workers to identify signs of abuse, and more robust community networks that could act swiftly if something was amiss. Moreover, the case sparked conversations about the systemic failures that allowed Jersey to fall through the cracks repeatedly, from being abused at home to falling victim to another trusted caretaker. It questioned how authorities and social services could better coordinate to protect vulnerable children, emphasizing the need for reform and increased awareness. Reflection and resolve. As the community reflected on the series of events that unfolded, the horrors of abuse, the frightening loss, and the slow pursuit of justice, they also resolved to transform their collective grief into meaningful action. Jersey Bridgeman's memory became a symbol of the ongoing struggle against domestic violence and a reminder of what is at stake when vigilance wavers. The tragedy underscored that while legal proceedings can bring justice, they cannot heal the deep emotional scars left behind. Healing required continuous community effort, psychological support, and an unwavering commitment to protecting children. In honoring Jersey, Bentonville set forth on a path to ensure that no other child would suffer a similar fate. A bell tolling for domestic violence. In the aftermath of Jersey Bridgeman's tragic death, the story took on a broader significance, serving as a solemn bell tolling for domestic violence, an urgent call to society to recognize, confront, and eradicate these pervasive issues. This final part underscores the critical lessons learned and the collective responsibility to protect children and vulnerable individuals from violence. Raising awareness and education. The community of Bentonville, along with advocacy groups and child protection agencies, spearheaded initiatives aimed at raising awareness about domestic violence. Educational campaigns were launched in schools, community centers, and online platforms to inform the public about the signs of abuse and the steps to take if they suspect a child is in danger. Workshops for parents, teachers, and local volunteers became commonplace, focusing on recognizing subtle and overt signs of child abuse, understanding the psychological impact of violence on children, learning how to safely report suspected cases of abuse, building supportive environments that encourage children to speak out. The story of Jersey Bridgeman was frequently cited in these programs, not as a mere tale of sorrow, but as a powerful illustration of the urgent need for community vigilance and intervention. Her life, though tragically short, became a beacon for change, inspiring action against the scourge of domestic violence. Community initiatives and policy advocacy. Local leaders and policymakers took Jersey's case as a rallying point to advocate for stronger child protection laws and better resources for at-risk families. Funding was increased for social services, mental health support, and community policing initiatives designed to identify and intervene in situations of domestic violence. Community groups organized forums and remembrance events where survivors of violence could share their experiences, find solidarity, and learn coping strategies. These gatherings fostered a culture of openness, where discussing domestic violence was no longer taboo, but a necessary conversation to drive change. The role of forensic science and law enforcement. The meticulous work of forensic scientists and law enforcement in Jersey's case highlighted the indispensable role of science and dedicated investigation in bringing perpetrators to justice. This case reinforced the importance of ongoing training for investigators in handling sensitive cases involving children, maintaining and updating forensic technology to ensure evidence is collected and analyzed effectively, building databases, and sharing information between jurisdictions to track and apprehend repeat offenders. By improving these systems, communities could better prevent, detect, and respond to domestic violence cases, potentially saving more lives in the future. A call to action for every individual. The final message of Jersey Bridgeman's story is not just a call for systemic change, but also for individual responsibility. Each person, whether a neighbor, teacher, friend, or a family member, has a role to play in protecting children and preventing domestic violence. This call to action includes vigilance, observing signs of distress or abuse in children and taking them seriously. Reporting, knowing the appropriate channels to report suspected abuse and acting without delay. Support, offering support to victims and families affected by violence, whether through direct assistance, emotional support, or guiding them to resources. Advocacy, using one's voice to advocate for stronger laws, better resources, and policies that protect children and vulnerable individuals. Honoring Jersey Bridgeman's legacy. Jersey Bridgeman's life, though tragically short, became a symbol of the resilience of the human spirit and a testament to the dire consequences of domestic violence when left unchallenged. Her legacy lives on through the changes she inspired in her community and the broader movement to protect children from harm. As the community of Bentonville continues to remember Jersey with purple ribbons and candlelight vigils, her story serves as a permanent reminder, a bell tolling for vigilance against domestic violence. It urges every individual to commit to a future where all children can grow up safe, loved, and free from fear. Through awareness, education, community action, and steadfast commitment to justice, society can transform the sorrow of Jersey's tragedy into hope and safety for generations to come.